this all set up. Was I in the right spot? There it is. All right, I'm ready whenever you guys. You guys ready? They're ready? All right. Father, we ask this finds people with open eyes and open ears. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, now tonight we're going back and we're going to pick up lecture 2 in the foundation set. Okay. Now, the first lecture, we started out, the main point of it is to put you in your spiritual body sometime in our past. That's really was the whole point of that, to just outline that everybody has 2 bodies. One is called a terrestrial body and one is called a celestial body, and then we broke those words down and understood exactly what it means to be created in the image of, that's what that means, is created in the image of. That's where we got the title for it. But then, like I said, in the end, we should have ended up in somewhere, I think it was Jeremiah chapter 1, which is where we're going to start actually tonight. Now, in the first lecture, we talked about the 2-pill choice, right? We were talking about Alice in Wonderland, how Alice halfway or early into the novel, she's given a choice that she can take one pill or another, the red pill or the blue pill, right? And the red pill sends her down the rabbit hole, and the blue pill sends her back to her actual reality. Talk a little bit about Neo a little bit farther into the Matrix. He takes the same red pill, but wakes up to a really despotic, really nasty kind of a reality that he didn't quite expect. Now, recently, I've been re-exposed actually, to a couple different branches of Christianity. One week, I ran into a guy, he's using words I recognize out of the Bible, and I get to talking to him though, and turns out he's a flat earther. Okay, well, fine. You want to believe the earth's flat? Absolutely, have at it, tear it up. Doesn't mean nothing to me. But what I do object to is when people want to say that that's what the Bible says. And he wasn't actually coming out and saying that, but he was kind of implying things like that and relating them in the same thing. Well, that's fine. So I move on with my life, no problem. And I go into next week, we go to church, right? And I go into a church that, I've never been there before, but, friends wanted to go. So I said, yeah, we'll go. And it just happens, I walk in there and then you spend 45 minutes to an hour listening to a guy convince you that all the fossilization you see in the world is due to Noah's flood. Yeah. All right, and these are called the young earth creationists, if you get down right where it is, Rubber Beach Road. Most of them are stealing from a guy named James Ussher, who, in his right, is a massively grand scholar. This dude's amazing. I always when I first started to learn about him, I wanted to learn just kind of the simple things, like where he was born, what he did, when he died, and then I was going to call him stupid. But the more I got to reading about him and the more things I found out about him, it's like, man, I need to be like this guy more, not just, he was good. And what I kind of think happened from what I've studied about it is that Usher's work's not published until, I think it's 2 years after his death, which means then that somebody came along and put it all together, probably titled it, maybe even finished some of it, that maybe just wasn't as good a scholar as Usher himself. I think a lot of controversy about that. And what he's really calculating is simply the time period between Adam and Christ is really what the calculation is really about. But it has nothing to do with the world. But nonetheless, they like to steal from that. And use that to say he, back then, had this figured out, which is not exactly true. Okay. And it's kind of funny because you get to talking to them, and then you got the flat earthers that are laughing at the young earthers, not because they think the earth is young, but because they think it's round.
Yeah.
And then you have the young earthers that are laughing at the flat earthers, not because they think it's flat, but because they say it's been around a while. You get that, and you go to another church, and you get people flopping around on the floor and doing something weird. You go to another one, and they're standing out in the yard, flapping their wings, trying to fly away. And to me, the only thing I can think of is that Christianity swallowed the red pill and fell down Alice's rabbit hole. I mean, if these are the alternatives, come on, I want to quit. I don't want to play the game if that's it, all right? Now, the good news is that that's not it. And that's where I draw my lines. And talking about drawing lines, we're always drawing lines, it seems like. is what does the Bible actually talking about? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. All right, let's go. Let's get this started. Let's go. If you're on the website, go to the Special Studies tab. We want to go to the world that then was, the first heaven and earth age. All right, we're going to go down past the graphic. This graphic, as we get through this, will make a lot more sense as we go through this lecture. By the end of the night, you'll be pretty much on your own on it. But the first place we're going to look is in Jeremiah, and let's go to Jeremiah chapter 1, which is where I think we left off in our original lecture on In Our Image. All right, and now let me get something to drink real quick. All right, now I just want to remind you and put you back into that mindset of you being in your spiritual body sometime in the past, all right? And this clarifies it really well in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4. Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. All right, let's stop right there. Before Jeremiah was formed in the womb of his mother, God already understood who Jeremiah was and what Jeremiah was going to be born and do. All right. Now that was where that's the thought we left with in our image. All right, so Jeremiah is in his celestial body when he's chosen to be a prophet. And then he's born of the flesh. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee and I ordained thee a prophet to the nations. So all this is done before Jeremiah's ever even had a thing to do, good or bad. It's already decided what Jeremiah's fate's going to be. All right?
You hear that?
Yeah, I think I do. All right. Now, what I want you to get out of this is what body is Jeremiah in when he's ordained a prophet? He's in a spiritual body. Okay? He's not been born of the flesh yet. Okay, so we have a celestial body. So how long has this celestial body been bumping around in the universe? Because the young earthers are going to tell you that it's just a few thousand years. All right? And then they're going to run around backwards explaining physical evidence and saying that everybody who studied this is stupid because they had it figured out from the beginning. All right. But the reality is they're just misrepresenting what's actually written. Now, I've also noticed another trend with the young earthers in particular. They're reading from a very new and updated version of the Bible. Okay, and the words that I would use, particularly in Genesis, to check out and verify the meaning of the author are not there anymore, and it makes the Strong's Concordance useless to me, so therefore it's just a useless book for me to study from. You can do what you want. But you can get a lot more out of the King James. Even if you don't like the language, you can still get a lot more out of it than you can off somebody else's idea of what it said. That's enough about that. But okay, so nonetheless, Jeremiah is in his spiritual body when he's ordained. Now flip over to Genesis chapter 1. We're talking about how old the law is. Let's go to the beginning and let's just work this. All right. Because if you can get this, you can actually get the gist of the rest of the lecture pretty easy. But the problem is that we have worked this so little in Christianity that nobody really understands what this is talking about. But we're going to break it apart, make it real nice and simple. And we might just refer to the graphic above because I like graphs because it helps you understand complex ideas a little bit simpler. So let's just see what it says. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and it reads, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's a statement. It's complete. It says in the beginning. Is that a time? Is that when? Only simply that it was in the beginning. Now, let's think about this. There's a guy named Edwin Hubble. Edwin Hubble is credited with the Big Bang Theory. He's the one that gets credit for it. And this is what he did, okay? He took it in his early astronomer days. He was one of the first people to look to celestial objects and measure their, the Doppler shift of the celestial objects. And in his notes, he wrote that everything that he saw was redshifted. That means it's all moving away from itself. It was a little bit later, a reporter kind of got a hold of that idea, and when he wrote his article, he's the one that termed it the Big Bang. It wasn't Hubble, it was a reporter that actually called it the Big Bang. Hubble just made the notation in his notebook. And because of this, though, the Big Bang Theory was born out of all this. And it was just that he was measuring the Doppler shift. Well, okay, I'm getting lost now. I had a point to all that. I didn't want to stop it. Well, anyway, Hubble, but he gets credit with the Big Bang. Well, if you think about the Big Bang, you think about it was all coming back. All he was saying was that if you stopped it and reversed it and everything comes back into one spot, it eventually all the matter in the universe ends up in one spot. All right, and from that's what everything was born from. Now, if you were an outside observer, let's just say you were standing outside of that just a little bit, all right, and you could somehow look at that, and you went and you moved in any direction you wanted to, say 1 billion light years, all right, that a billion light years. Now that's a billion light years is 186,000 miles per second. Okay, for 1 billion years. Now that's a number that's so big it's hard to get your mind even close to wrapped around. All right. Now if you went that far away and you turned around and looked back at where that began to expand, all right, the universe would look to you as if because the pressure and temperature was so great that everything was hyper-excited. So even light was hyper-excited to an incalculable speed. Yeah. All right? So even being 1 billion light years away, if you look back at that, and it began to happen, it would look like the universe went from infinitely small to infinitely large, right, on the blink of an eye. Okay? Now that sounds pretty godly to me. A pretty good thing. And early on in science, the debate was, well, had the universe been around forever? Or did it have a beginning? And here in the Bible, it says just those things. That the universe itself had a beginning. And Christianity's really wrestled with this. I mean, I see signs all over, marquees around here mocking the whole idea. Yeah. All right? But I don't think they're sharp on their book. All right? Now, in the beginning, doesn't say when, but it did identify that it had a beginning. All right? And there's a couple things you need to get out of what it says. First of all, in the beginning, who did it? God did it. What did he do? He created the heavens and the earth. So that's two things, and that's also in an order. All right, so that's two things in order. Now, doesn't say when. And that, if you look at the graphic above, here at the very top, you even have that in the beginning. Then you have the heavens. Then you have the earth being established. Now, the beginning, we know through science, is about 14 billion years ago. All right? And the earth itself is about 4.5 billion years. All right? Now, that gives you some time right in there. So, from in the beginning to the formation of the earth, you're talking about several billion years just in that process, and then 4.5 billion years since then. All right? And I want you to hold on to that real good. Okay? Because we're going to start to work this real good. All right. Now, back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. I want to stop right there. I don't want to finish this verse just yet. All right, let's work this phrase, was without form and void. If you look here on the center column, it's set up a little bit different, but the references are in the middle this time for both sides. And we're on the right side right now, but we're working. You want to go down to where we find 1961. Now, 1961 is Hayah, and it's the word that was translated to was, and it means to come to pass. That it came to pass that. And now I had a center column reference, King James Reference Bible one time that had the was translated as an alternate translation to became, and that would really help right there. And the earth became void and without form, and that is exactly what the point is. When you read this, that you have to understand that. But nonetheless, let's just go with come to pass. The next word without form and void is tuhu, and it means to lie waste to, a desolation, specifically of the surface. With the last word being buhu, which means and void. It means to lie in indistinguishable ruin. So what it says actually in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 is that the earth, that it came to pass that the earth was made to be an indistinguishable ruin. All right? Made a desolation of the surface. That is without form and void. Now we're going to get to exactly before the end of the day exactly what time period this probably is, okay? But the point that I want you to get at it is that it had been destroyed. Now, remember your chronology then. We've not had one day of creation in this age. But yet the earth has been created, it was created in the beginning, and then it had been destroyed. Because this fits completely into the earth's history that we study just as GP here in the United States as part of general education. All these things are right here in front of us. You got to remember remember what it says in Daniel. It told Daniel to seal up what he was doing until when? Until the last days when knowledge would be expanded. You got to remember when you're working these subjects, these Old Testament subjects in the Bible, they're written specifically to this generation. It requires a 21st century mind to understand what God was talking about from the beginning. Okay, and you have to approach the Bible in that way. That's all going to mess up our recording. Maybe we'll get back on here in a minute. Ta-da! And we are back because we have technical difficulties. But anyway, we're around now. Okay, where was I? Oh, the earth had been destroyed. All right, but yet we've not had one day of creation yet in this age. All right. Now let's from there. Okay, I want to go to Jeremiah. All right. Now we were in Jeremiah chapter 4, so back to Jeremiah, but we're to chapter 4 instead of chapter 1. All right. Because this word was without form and void, that phrase is only used one other time, and it's here in the book of Jeremiah. All right. And here, Jeremiah is describing the destruction that occurred. All right. Now, modern Christianity, most of the places, because it's going to say with water, is going to say that we're talking about Noah's flood. All right, but we're going to look and see what was actually on Noah's boat when we start talking about this, and you tell me it was that Noah's flood. Or is it Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, where the earth became, or that it came to pass that the earth was made to be an indistinguishable ruin. Okay? Well, you can judge for yourself by the time we're done with it. Listen to what it says. All talking about the age of the heaven and earth. For my people is foolish. They have not known me. They are Sodom's children. They have none understanding. Listen to what it says. They're wise to do evil, but to do good they have no knowledge. All right? Now listen to that. That's sottish. You want to break that down? Sottish means stupid. All right? He's saying my kids are a little bit dull anymore. All right? Because remember, he's talking about us. All right? Don't ever remove yourself from the book. If you remove yourself from it, then it doesn't do you any good if you don't think it's talking about you. All right, and that everybody has to approach the Bible that way, that it applies to them. So listen to what he says about us in this generation. This is where he gets into it. Okay, knowledge is the thing that they're missing, right? They're quick to do evil, but to do good, they don't have any knowledge of what it even means. All right, listen to what he says. Because remember what Jeremiah is telling the people here is that if you don't think God will destroy you and start over, listen to what he's done already. All right, and Jeremiah's people understood what he was talking about. It's us that's not got it. All right, because everybody wants to stick Noah's flood in here, and you just can't do it. All right, I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. This is the exact expression used in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, the only other place in the Bible that it's used. Okay, and the heavens, they had no light. If you go back and you read Noah's account, the heavens having no light are never mentioned. Okay? I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled. All of the hills moved lightly. We're talking about a worldwide earthquake.
Everything
right.
moving.
Everything moving and shifting. Right. Okay? Now we're going to get to what caused that here in a little bit before we get done with this. Yeah. But Noah's flood, nonetheless, never mentions anything about a worldwide earthquake. Mm-hmm. Right? We've been through it word by word. Just simply not there. Listen to what it says. I beheld, and lo, there was no man. All the birds of heaven were fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness. And all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord and by his furious anger. Okay, now these cities from our first heaven, think about what before it was destroyed. We got from the beginning, 14 billion years, formation of the earth, 4.5 billion years, what kind of cities would you think could develop out of a culture that had existed for that amount of time? Okay? See, people, we often lose our roots in Christianity. And our roots in Christianity are not in our terrestrial beings, but it is in our celestial being. All right? It is our celestial being that has existed for an eternity. When you were created in the beginning. Okay? That's when you were created. We've done the in the beginning. We have not talked about one day of creation, about a terrestrial creation. Okay? Not yet. And we're going to back all this up here just a little bit more as we go. All right? Now, listen to what it says. One more verse. For thus hath the Lord said, the whole land shall be desolate, yet I will not make a full end. All right? And he doesn't. He destroyed it all. It's all gone. Now he starts over with us. All right? If you're in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3. That's where you're at, where we start, because he didn't make the full end. Now, people want to tell you that this is Noah's boat, okay? That we're talking about Noah's flood, just because it mentions water, and you don't realize that there are actually two floods, because Genesis chapter 2, verse 2, or Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, it's flooded already, because it was the Spirit of God that moved upon the face of the deep that begins this age, the terrestrial age. Okay, well, let's flip over to Genesis chapter 7 then, and let's just look at Noah's boat, because I want to nail this down really good, all right? Because people like to go to where we're going next after this and try to mess up one of my favorite chapters in the whole entire Bible. All right, it's 2 Peter chapter 3. When you understand it, you understand what it really means, all right? But now you're getting the background. First of all, we're going to destroy this idea about it being Noah's flood. Listen to what it says about just went on Noah's boat, okay? And the Lord said unto Noah, come thou and all thy household into the ark. So what does it say in Jeremiah? There was no man, right? Not Noah and his whole family and his sons and their daughters.
And whoever other friends they decided to pack
that's
in.
That's right. The only criteria,
neighbors and
well, the only criteria is that you hadn't have intermixed with the Geber.
Yeah.
That's the big thing.
So
right?
yeah.
And it does say in Genesis to put two of every flesh on. He tells my spirit shall not strive with man, for man is flesh. A few verses later, he tells you to put two of every flesh on the ark. So there is room, biblically, for there to be more than just Noah's family. Like I said, the reason for the flood is to destroy the Geber. The criteria to get on the ark was not to have intermixed with them, and they were specifically looking at Noah's lineage only. People overlook these things because they don't understand the creation from 5, 6, 7, and 8. Right, from the very beginning all the way through Adam. To Adam, right. Now, if you don't understand that, just put it on the shelf, and we're going to go back and pick all those up eventually. All right, this is part of it right here. Now, nonetheless, so you got Noah's whole bunch is on there. All right, and the reason why, for thou have I seen righteous before me in this generation. He is talking about a genealogy. All right, and that's the reason. That's what gets you on Noah's boat. Is your genealogy clear? Is it clean? Now listen to what it says. Goes on it. All right. Of every clean beast thou shalt put unto thee by sevens. Does anything about twos?
Nope.
No. By sevens, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Now let's go back up to the clean ones. Talking about by sevens, male and female. So clean animals are herd animals, first of all.
Goats.
They have goats,
cows,
sheep, cows, right. They have a hoof that splits and they chew their cud. All right, so really what it's saying is take a male and a herd of female,
yes.
right? You don't need one male.
You need one male. Yeah.
Right, you need 7 does. All right, and that's exactly what's really going on, what's really saying there. But for the ones that are clean or unclean, only by twos because you don't eat them.
Yeah.
All right, but they are great bursts of beating. Donkeys, camels, things like that. Those kind of things are great bursts of beating.
Beasts
of burden is what I'm trying to spit out. Okay, so nonetheless, what about there were no birds, right? All the birds have fled, right?
All the way up.
Yeah. The fowls also by the air by sevens, the male and his female, to keep seed alive upon all the earth. All right. It wasn't destroyed totally in Noah's flood. All right. They look at Jeremiah chapter 4 where we were, right, and think Noah's flood, but none of the events that are matching actually lines up with Noah's flood. And they think that's just some archaic mistake. But it's not. It is very intentional. God can count. It said in Jeremiah there was none survived that. None. Everything
Nothing.
perished, right? Except we're all still alive. When you're born now, and you realize you have survived 2 heaven and earth ages if you live right now. You've survived both of them. One's gone, you live in one right now. All right, and there's one more to come, which we're going to find, well, which we already know because we just finished the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
And if you want a little bit deeper look at that, it's not real deep, but our last video in the book of Revelation gets all in that. It's just a real superficial look at what's coming, and it's enough to make you go blah, blah, blah. So, nonetheless. But nonetheless, the point is that Jeremiah, the destruction that's talked about in Jeremiah is the destruction that's talked about in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. All right, it has nothing to do with chapter 7 and 8 of the book of Genesis. All right. Noah's flood is an event that occurs in this, the second or terrestrial age.
Yeah.
It's an event that occurs in the second one.
He already said he would destroy the earth
completely. Right, completely again, right. And that's when it started over.
To flood it over like that would
the way
destroy
done
the
it
earth
again,
completely.
Right.
It's
And it
already
even
been
says
said
the
that.
reason why you're there is to keep seed alive.
Yeah.
All right, now we're going to draw on that when we go to 2 Peter, all right? Because the purpose of Noah's boat was so things would survive. Just anyway, it doesn't matter. I don't care if you look at it at this point as it being a worldwide flood or a local one. Doesn't really matter when we go here to 2 Peter chapter 3. And that's where I want you to go now. All right, over to 2 Peter chapter 3. And let's get everything set up here. All right, now this is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. Just flat out. There's no other way for me to put it. All right, and it is right on what we're talking about today. All right. Now, I've just recently heard this very butchered. But we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of chapter 3 and work into it. Right, we're not going to go all the way through it. We're only going to go up through to where this age gets destroyed. And if you want to look at the new one, well then, like I said, I'm not pushing any kind of videos, but check out the last video of the book of Revelation. That'll get you a little bit about that. All right, now let's see what it says in 2 Peter chapter 3 about the age of the earth and about the things that have occurred. Now, bearing in mind Jeremiah, we're not talking about Noah's flood. All right, we're talking about Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. All right, now listen to this. Chapter 3, verse 1. This second epistle, beloved, I now write unto you in both, which I stir up your pure mind by way of remembrance. Okay, and that sounds really kind of weird, but all he's saying is I want you to remember something in this level of your soul, on the inside parts of you. I want to stir your soul that you remember these things and don't forget it. All right, and hold fast to it. And that's what he's saying. All right, that you may be mindful of the words which were spoken before by the holy prophets. Which ones? Well, let's talk about Moses has got Genesis. Jeremiah, we were just talking about that. Back in Genesis again, talking about the Noah's flood. All right, so we've been all over the place talking about this in the prophets. All right, and it's not the only places. I just took the most in-your-face ones. All right. Nonetheless, knowing this first about holy prophets and of the commandments of the apostles of the Lord Jesus Christ. So not just that, but both. He's tying it in specifically. The Old Testament and New Testament prophets are all going to talk about it. All right, and Paul does a lot when you really understand what he was saying. All right. Verse 3, knowing this first, all right, now we're talking about the last days, right? Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers walking after their own lusts. All right. Now, most church people will want to tell you this is everybody out there. All right, but this statement is directed internally to people within the churches.
Yeah.
Okay, the scoffers are coming from within, not from without. Let's get that right. Now, what are they saying? Saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. And if you've been around about 10 minutes, you're going to hear somebody say this. I've heard it all my life. Oh, they've been talking about this for such a long time. And then they want to say the scoffers aren't in there, and it's exactly what he's saying. Yeah. They're scoffing. Let me remind you, the parable of the fig tree came to pass in 1948. That means the generations of fig tree this year is 74 years old. All right. How long does a generation actually last? All right. Where were we? All right. Walking after them, let's sing. Where is the promise of coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as from the beginning of creation. Verse 5. For this they willingly are ignorant of. Whoa, wait a minute. What does it say? For this they are willingly ignorant of. Right? This requires you to stand there and say, no, I don't care what I see.
I don't believe that.
I don't believe what I see. I want to believe what somebody else says. Let's just put it that way. What's he say, though? He says that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. Okay? Let's get this right. Now, we're talking about the time period from in the beginning until Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, or Jeremiah chapter 4, whichever way you want to look at the destruction. All right? Listen to what it says. Whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. Okay, now I want to start doing some word work here, all right? I want you to understand two Greek words here. One is word, and the other one is perished, all right? Now, the word is 165, all right? And it's actually a word that you're familiar with in English. It's eon, all right? Aeon in Greek, but we would call it the word eon. Now, what it means is properly an age, all right? Or also all of the past. All right, now it's compared with a Greek word 5550, which is chronos, which means a space of time. Okay, so we're not talking about Earth, right, what's being destroyed, all right, excuse me. Oh, I'm in the wrong spot, am I not? I am. Let's start over. Let's do this again. I'm jumping ahead. I got two words. I usually color code them, and there's two the same color, and I just messed that up. All right, let's go back and try this again. I'm on the word word, all right? The Greek word is logos. This is what I'm trying to get to, all right? We'll get to aeon in a minute. All right, the word here, that by the word of God the heavens were of old. All right? This word here is logos. Now, it means something said by reason, by also reasoning, by extension of computation. Now, listen to this. With the article in John, all right, it's the divine expression that is Christ. All right, but we're not in John. We're in 2 Peter chapter 3. Now, if you go look at John, the W in the word is capitalized. All right, so for the English reader, that tells you that logos there has the article with it. All right, that means it's the divine expression. All right, but here in 2 Peter, if you notice, the W is not capitalized. All right, so that doesn't mean that you can apply the divine expression. What you have to apply is what does the word logos actually mean, okay? And it means by reasoning or by extension of computation. Now, think about reasoning. Isaac Newton saw an apple fall, and he reasoned in his mind that there must be a force that makes that apple move to the ground, all right? So in his mind, he comes up with an idea, and he just simply calls it gravity, that it's the force that makes the apple fall to the earth. All right? So that's great. That's reasoning. All right? Now, computation, that's your other type of information you get in science. That's numerically driven data. That's quantifiable evidence is what we call it, or quantifiable data in science. So you have both of the types of science contained here within the definition of logos. One by reasoning and the other by computation. It's exactly how we play science. So really what it's saying then, in a sense, that what it's saying is that by the reasoning and by all your reasoning and all the math that you can come up with, the heavens and the earth are what? They're of old.
They're old.
All right? And to deny that requires willing ignorance. Now when you look around in the Christianity falling down that rabbit hole we were talking about, it's exactly the kind of things you see now. It's a dependence on somebody to tell them what is going on instead of actually legging it out a little bit on your own. You don't have to be much of a rocket scientist in the Bible to ask some questions, all right? And it's time people start digging this book back out and start asking your teachers some questions. If they can't answer some of your questions, they don't need to be standing where they are telling you how to eat a cabbage or anything else. All right, so if they won't answer questions, then get rid of them. You don't need them. All right, and keep your money too while you're at it. You don't mind telling them, tell them I said so. But anyway, so the way God wants people to count then is with reasoning and with math. All right, the age of the universe. So good, let's do that. Then you got 14 billion. You got the Earth established about 4.5 billion years. We've had continental drift going on at least the last 65 million years. Had a lot of things that changed. Those seashells that were in the bottom of the ocean are now on the top of Mount Everest because continental plates collide, and over the period of millions of years, they raise into great mountains. All right, these are the truths. Yeah. All right, and to deny these things requires what the Bible calls willing ignorance. Yeah. All right, it's just not a lack of it. You just got to ignore all the reasoning and the math that goes along with the way.
Yes.
All right, now. Some people say that might be hitting on that a little bit too hard, but I don't think so.
What I'm seeing, so either.
Yeah. How would you like to be somebody who grew up in the 21st century, be looking for God, and you go into a church that's got a cross on the top of it, standing there looking at it, they're talking about Jesus, they're using the same words you might even hear here, but then they turn around and tell you that the Earth's flat. Yeah. Or that he just got here yesterday.
Or evolution doesn't exist.
Or things like that, exactly. Yeah. Things that don't have any concept, all because some guy stands up there, or a woman too, don't let the women off the hook, stands up there and tells them exactly what to think. All right? We quit thinking on our own. I don't know what to say other than that. We live in a wonderful time. It's a wonderful time of knowledge and things. Believe me,
knowledge.
That's right. You better like your vaccinations because you should have went back 200 years and they'd love to get rid of some of the things that they had.
Everybody's dying.
But nonetheless, all right, let's get on with this just a little bit. All right, listen to what it says. I want you to remember Noah's flood on this. Whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. All right. Now, if you study the book of Revelation, you're going to run into two names in chapter 9 of the Antichrist. One is Abaddon and the other one is Apollyon. All right. And if you start running the word Apollyon, all right, you're going to come across Apollyon. All right, and what it means is to destroy fully. All right, to fully destroy. What did it say where I stopped in the book of Genesis in Noah's day? The reason for the things that were on the boat, regardless of whether it's worldwide or whether it's regional, was to keep the seed alive.
Yeah.
All right, and here it says that it perished, just like in Jeremiah chapter 4. Just like in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Okay? The Bible says that you have an extensive history of the world. Thousands of years is just this age, the flesh age. The flesh age is a blink compared to what the celestial age was before this one. Okay? Now you got to remember that Lucifer brought all that down. He brought it all down. Because of his rebellion is why we're now born of the flesh. And that's why the Bible takes off in verse 3, all right, with the creation of this heaven and earth age, the terrestrial age, one where we possess a terrestrial body, all right, and then return to our celestial existence upon your biological death. All right? That was the whole point of this age, so we can sort this stuff out once and for all. All right? But nonetheless, by the word of God itself, the purpose of Noah's boat was to keep seed alive. It did not perish in Noah's day. All right? But it did at the destruction of the first heaven and earth age. That's why you find the world destroyed, made a desolation of surface before he starts over with us. Okay. Let's skip to the Hebrews. We're running a little bit long, so let's not get into that one. That was Aeon. All right, I'll just touch it real quick. It says who created the worlds. The world there, the word plural is meaning two worlds, but it means ages. It's just like Chronos. It's Aeon, but nonetheless. So let's skip that. But now I want to go down to the bottom of the page, and if you're following your Bible, go to Job chapter 38. And then we're going to talk about this just a little bit, because this is where it gets good. This is where you get to find out how long you've really been around. Now, like I set up the book of Job just a little bit, though. Job is one of the oldest books in the Bible. It's right there with Genesis. All right? And that's a secular statement, not a religious statement. It just simply means that the oldest fragments of Job and the oldest fragments of Genesis all date from the same time. All right, like I said, it's not a religious comparison, but a secular one. That means you can assume that Genesis and Job are in play at the same time. The same people that teach the book of Genesis are also going to teach you the book of Job. All right? And so you can also assume that when you're learning the book of Job, they would assume that you already understand the book of Genesis. All right? And so therefore, Job is given as a parable. All right? And then the reason for the parable is the same reason, Dr. Pepper's rough when you talk. The reason for the parable form is just a lot like early European theater, like Shakespeare. They didn't really talk like that during Shakespeare's time. All right? And that stuff came at you at Mach 4. It was like fast. And the reason why is because there was no multimedia. You had to pay attention and focus, or you wouldn't know when to laugh or when to cry. And then people look around, they don't know what's going on. They don't have any idea what Shakespeare's talking about. And you would just be found out that way. Yep. All right? And so that was a lot of that has to do is exactly the same way that they described this out as a parable. All right? Job as being a parable for the same reason. All right? It's a riddle. You got to pay attention. You got to focus. What did he say then? Oh, wait, it means something. Am I looking at a symbol? Am I looking at the knowledge? What is this? Blah, blah, blah. But it's a parable, and it's fun. All right? Now, why don't you just listen to what it says? Because sometimes if you just listen to the story, you can get a lot out of it. All right? Now, here in Job chapter 38, finally God's going to speak. It's been, aside from the first chapter, it's been just Job's friends and even his wife telling him how screwed up he is. About to just kill himself and be done with it. All right? Thank goodness Job doesn't take their advice. He needs another wife. Yeah. Because she wasn't doing him any favors. I'll just say that the way it is. You're in that kind of shape, and you just curse God and die and be done. I want a divorce first.
Yeah, hold on. Here's this piece of paper.
That's right. But nonetheless, in chapter 38 now, God speaks finally. All right, and listen to what he says. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. This is the same whirlwind he talked to Ezekiel out of. This is the same whirlwind that shows up in we're going to talk about in the book of Exodus. All right, and said, "Who is this?" I love this. "Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge?" Job, what are you listening to these idiots for?
Yeah.
All right, how can you listen to these people? It had to hurt Job. I'm sure his feelings were hurt. "Gird up now thy loins like a man." All right, now remember, to gird thyself is a military expression, and it means to grab your skirt, tuck it into your belt, so you can pull your sword out and kick and fight and scrap like a good warrior does. All right, so when you see that, that's a military expression that means prepare for battle. All right, "For I will demand thee, and answer thou me." Job's got to answer some questions now. Listen to what he says. "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding." Now, the foundation is the first thing that's put down. So we're talking about the core fundamental, the 4.5 billion year ago, when he put the earth together. He's asking Job, where were you when I did these things? Remember, it's a parable. "Who hath laid the measure thereof, or if thou knowest, or who has stretched the line upon it?" All right. Who has laid the measure out? Who determined how big it was? Then who has stretched the line upon it? That's the line that he's referring to as the magnetic line that you get for a compass. It's what makes a compass point north. It's that line that we use to navigate all over the world. All right. Well, what's that line? How is it stretched? All right. Now, remember I told you, I mentioned earlier back in Daniel, remember, the book was sealed until the last days when knowledge would be expanded. So let your knowledge be expanded and understand what he's talking about. He's telling him when he formed the earth that he put it together in a way that makes the compass point north. What else does that do? That thing does a lot. That's as a result of your magnetic field of the earth. That's right.
Controls the atmosphere.
That's right. Controls everything. It keeps our atmosphere from being ripped away from the earth. It keeps the earth from being sterilized, like a pear in a microwave oven. I mean, literally. And people say, "How do you know that?" And I say, "Well, because we have the Aurora Borealis. That's the place where the energized particles from the sun interact with our magnetic field at its weakest points." What he's telling him is, Job, when were you? And he had to put that together from the foundation of the earth, because the way that works is because of the great pressure, we have an inner core that's solid, we have an outer core that's liquid, and it's all spinning. And all that is a big dynamo. It's just like the electric motor in your washing machine, really. There's no different from that, but on a planetary scale. He's telling Job, I put all that back together, but where were you? The answer for Job is right with you. I was there.
Yeah, we
I
were
was
there,
there
yeah.
when you did it. All right, that's the answer to the parable of Job. All right, listen to what he says. Where are the foundations thereof fastened, or who have laid the cornerstone thereof? How are the foundations of the earth fastened? By gravity to the sun. We orbit the sun just like the rest of the planetary bodies. All right? And you can't know that until around the 21st century.
Yeah.
You can't understand that until God penned it in the oldest book of the Bible. All right? But yet we fail to recognize it often. All right? Listen to this. You talk about another age, right? We had another age, right? Well, listen to this. Now remember, the question is, where wast thou when? All right? Where wast thou when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? All right? The sons of God, that's an easy one. That's everybody.
Yeah, everyone.
Anybody. It's the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. The evil, the saints, every sinner in the middle. They all were members of the sons of God. All right? But there was a time when the two morning stars sang together. All right? Who are the morning stars? Revelation chapter 21, Christ, I am the bright and morning star, right? Lucifer's name means morning star.
So there's
By
only
reason of
been
his brightening. There's only two ever been. All right? From the time that he was created, Ezekiel 28. He's been one of the morning stars. But there was a time when the two morning stars sang together and all of us shouted for joy together. There wasn't any discourse between, or bad discourse between peoples. Nation wasn't warring with nation. All right? And we had an entire age that way until it ended and it was destroyed. Now, I'll say, well, when did it end? I've been talking about this big, if you talk about Paul, he would call it the katabo, all right? And
Yeah.
it'd be the Greek word, the casting down, all right? So when did the great casting down actually occur? Now, I'm a firm believer that when God destroys something, he's going to leave some fingerprints. That's one of the reasons why I don't think Noah's flood was a worldwide flood. There's no physical evidence that suggests it, all right? And when you get to looking at the language, there's plenty of room, there's plenty of wiggle room in the language just because they're going from an English translation, and I'm looking at the Hebrew version of it a little bit deeper. Not no meaning in a deep way. It's just dictionary work. It's not anything. It ain't no whiz bang stuff.
Yeah.
All right. It's just a little bit of dictionary work. But anyway, let's go. I want to get on with this because I'll get sidetracked. Go over to Job chapter 40. Now we're going to be finishing up here. Because I'll talk all night long, and we got stuff we need to do, and I know you guys got stuff you need to do. All right. And now, when did it end? All right, we're going to determine when it ended. All right, right here in this chapter. Now, in chapter 40, I'm just going to break it to you right now. You're going to get a description of a herbivore that is a dinosaur. And if you go to chapter 41, you're going to get another description of a not-so-herbivore that is aquatic that lived in the ocean. All right, that's called Leviathan. All right. These are not monsters. I saw some goofball on YouTube the other day talking about, yeah, you were sea monsters. No, These weren't sea monsters. These were animals we know and understand. These are things that we can see in the 21st century, right? Remember, times with us, the last days when knowledge is expanded, you got to use that, all right? So when you look at 41, we're not going to do 41, but read it on your own, you'll go, he's not kidding. It's a sea monster, all right, but it's the one that we know about, all right? But here we're going to talk about another one. And this, if you read this to a third grader with a crayon and a piece of paper, they're going to draw you a dinosaur. All right, now just listen to the description. It says, now listen to this. All right, this is where it starts out. Behold now a behemoth, chapter 40, verse 15. Behold now behemoth. Behemoth is just a Hebrew word that means a large quadrupedal herbivore or animal. Not necessarily a herbivore, but animal. All right. Behold now behemoth, which I made with thee. All right. He means that's in the same age is what he's actually talking about. All right. Now listen to this description, because this animal does not exist today. And I don't care what some preacher tries to tell you, he wasn't going to be on Noah's boat either. All right. And the reason why I know is because he's going to describe a titanosaur, and a titanosaur cannot even breathe the atmosphere that we have today. He would die upon birth. All right. Now, I hate to break it that way. I don't hate to break it that way. I'll do it all day long. Nonetheless, now listen to what it says. But he made this animal when he made him. He eateth grass as an ox. Lo now, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. All right, so this guy's big. His force is in his stomach. All right, so he's gigantic. That's what behemoth means, even to this day. All right, it means something giant. Now listen to what it says. Lo now, his strength is in his loins. Oh, and his force is in the navel of his belly. Right, his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. All right. Now, don't think about cedars like we have around here, but think about Job cedars, which were like cedars of Lebanon.
Like redwoods.
Like redwoods, right. That's the best of North American comparison, right. So these were gigantic trees, and he's trying to say his tail is like one of those. Now, you can put that people have tried to make this out to be a hippopotamus and all kind of stuff, but there's just no way you can. The sinews of his stones are wrapped tight together. His bones are as pieces of brass, and his bones are like bars of iron. Look here to your right, and then look at the size of that bone. That's just one leg bone out of a titanosaur. Now, if you can't get a comparison of size from that, though, I don't know what's wrong with you. There's a couple more up there. They came in all kind of sizes. Some of them were just utterly huge, though. All right, like the behemoth here. Listen to what it says about him. Verse 19, he is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. That's not really translated well. But it's all saying the only person that can walk up and pet him is the guy that made him. Is really kind of what he's getting at. There's nobody who can even get close to him. He's even unaware probably of most things around him. Right. Surely the mountains bring him forth food where all the beasts of the fields play. That's a bit of information that science has brought out recently in the last 20 years or so in paleontology, that titanosaurs like this, they didn't live in like muggy, swampy areas. They lived up in the mountains that grazed from the tops of trees. All right, and it's even telling you specifically that this bad bear lives in the mountains. All right, and that's where that's where he lives at. All right, now he layeth under the shade trees, in the covert of the reeds and ferns. The shady trees cover him with their shadow, and the willows and the brooks compass about him. Behold, he drinketh up a river and haste not. Every animal that you ever see at a water hole in this age is scared at a water hole. Even a lion is careful because he knows there are things in the water that'll eat a lion. But not him. Not this guy. He don't care. He just muddles up and starts to drink. Listen to what it says about him. Behold, he drinketh up a river and haste not, and he can draw thirst that he can draw up the Jordan in his mouth. That's a lot of water, the Jordan River. I mean, that's a lot of water. Now, you can say what you want, but there's only one time that an animal like this has ever lived, and that was about 155 million years ago. All right, as a part of an overall animal group that had over 100 million year run. Okay, before it ended. Now listen to what it says. He taketh it with his eyes, his nose pierceth through snares. Man, that's horrible. All it's saying is, if you look at him, you're going to know a couple things. One, I can't trap this guy. And if I did, I can't put a ring in his nose. And that's really all it's saying, is that you can't come up with a trap.
Him.
Right, yeah, you can't even tame him.
You can't do it,
It's just too big. All right? And that's a real eloquent way of describing that.
That's funny, yeah.
Okay? Now, we're talking about the destruction. All right, here's where it comes down to it. When did these animals disappear from creation? Then it was at the KT boundary, right? Now, if you grew up in church, you might not know what the KT boundary is. But the KT boundary is that point, that layer in the earth where we have high concentrations of different kind of elements that are only found in things like asteroids. This layer is a right. Now, this layer, nothing below it, or all dinosaur fossils are found below this layer, nothing above it. This works real in conjunction with the Yucatan Peninsula, the crater that's discovered there. All the math works. Jeremiah was talking about it was destroyed, water. It was by water. Yeah. At the Yucatan Peninsula strike, the strike that destroyed the dinosaurs, would have generated, okay, it was the size of Mount Everest. So that means while the first part of it's making contact with the Earth, it still has over 30,000 feet left that's still in the air. The impact scenario is absurd that comes out of it. It generates a tsunami that would have went around the world probably a few times.
Okay, it didn't vaporize.
It did most of it.
yeah.
It did a lot of it. 700 meters. It blew ejected into orbit. So days after, this stuff's starting to burn back down. As soon as it wipes out water, a few days later, all that debris comes back down out of orbit on fire again, and we have evidence of almost a worldwide fire. Okay, so this was a major event. Now, but when you start talking about natural events like this, there are 5 major extinction events on the planet. All right, like the Permian extinction, a long, long time ago, one of the first one. It was the biggest one ever. But all these extinction events unfolded over periods of thousands of years. Okay, except one, and that's the KT event. When the asteroid hit the Earth, within minutes, everything on the planet knew something was wrong.
Yep.
And overnight, it ended. It was destroyed. It was made
Everybody
to be
was dead, yeah.
a desolation of surface.
And something like that wouldn't just kill animal life; it would kill
It-
all plant life.
everything, right?
It would
Everything
liquefy,
died,
yeah, it would
right?
be crazy something.
Wherein the world that then was perished. Was destroyed fully. Not Noah's flood. Okay, you really get somewhere when you can separate Noah's flood as an event that happens in in the second heaven and earth age, knowing that there was an age before that was actually destroyed.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's my big problem with people that are teaching the way is that's just not what the Bible's saying, all right? And you don't want to you go into church and you see these things going on, and you really don't want to be a part of it because you think it's absurd, because you've been raised in a place where we've seen the planet from orbit and we know that it's round.
We know it's round,
We know it, and we know it's been around for a long time. It's just poor teaching that gets it done.
It does. It is too. Yeah.
But nonetheless, I hope that helps some people. I don't really care what your pastor, what your whoever. I don't care. If there's 2 of you out there in Twitterville or wherever you're listening from on Facebook, that helped understand something. That's
Cool,
what I
yeah,
care
that's what
about.
matters,
If there's just 2 of you, if 10,000 listening, and 2 of you get something out of it, I'm good with that. As long as it's what's actually there.
Right.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. We're back in the books of Exodus, chapter 3. We'll pick it up in verse 4 if I remember right. And you guys have a good night.